Mark, Emma, Liam, Sophie, and Dan were college friends who loved adventure. One weekend, they decided to escape the city's chaos and reconnect with nature. They chose Shadow Hollow, a remote forest known for its untouched beauty and peaceful surroundings. The locals warned them against camping there, mentioning strange happenings, but the group shrugged it off. When they arrived, the forest seemed perfect. Towering trees, a crystal-clear lake, and the serenity they had been craving. They laughed as they set up their tents near the water, teasing each other about how creepy it was that there were no other campers around. The first night was uneventful. They sat around the campfire telling stories and roasting marshmallows. The forest was eerily quiet, but it didn't bother them much. Mark joked, "Maybe the ghosts are too scared of us to show up." Everyone laughed, their voices echoing into the stillness of the night. At midnight, the group went to their tents. Emma stared at the stars for a moment before zipping her tent shut. The peaceful ambiance lulled them all to sleep. The next morning, Sophie woke up first. She went to fetch water from the lake but stopped in her tracks. Near the water's edge, there were strange footprints, large and misshapen, almost claw-like. She brushed it off, thinking it might have been an animal. That day, they hiked deeper into the forest, enjoying the sights and taking photos. As the sun began to set, they noticed the woods growing unusually quiet. The usual chirping of birds and rustling leaves was gone. Dan tried to lighten the mood, but even he couldn't deny the oppressive silence. That evening, they sat around the fire again, their laughter more subdued. Sophie mentioned the footprints she'd seen. "I thought it was an animal, but they didn't look right." Dan rolled his eyes. "Sophie, not everything's a horror movie." At that moment, they heard a faint noise, like whispering, carried on the wind. Everyone froze. Liam laughed nervously. "See? The trees just like to gossip at night." But Sophie wasn't convinced. They returned to their tents. Around 2 a.m., Emma woke up to a faint sound outside. It was like footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the tents. Her heart pounded as she peeked out, but nothing was there. She convinced herself it was her imagination and fell back asleep. By the third day, the group couldn't ignore the strange occurrences. Sophie found deep scratches on one of the trees near their campsite, far too high to have been made by any normal animal. Liam tried to convince everyone it was probably a bear, but his voice lacked confidence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere grew heavier. The group gathered around the fire, uneasy but determined to enjoy their last night. Around midnight, the whispering returned louder this time. It wasn't the wind. It was distinct, like voices murmuring just out of reach. The group huddled closer to the fire. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the trees, followed by the sound of something heavy moving toward them. Mark grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the forest. "Hello? Is someone there?" His voice wavered. 2 glowing eyes stared back at him from the darkness high above the ground. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs unnaturally long and bent. The group froze in terror as the creature stepped closer, its movements jerky and unnatural. Emma screamed, breaking the silence. They all ran toward the tents, grabbing whatever they could. Mark yelled, "To the car, we need to leave." They sprinted through the forest, the creature's footsteps pounding behind them. The air grew colder with every step, and the whispering voices became deafening. When they reached the car, Dan fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The engine roared to life, and they sped down the narrow dirt road. But no matter how far they drove, The headlights kept revealing the same stretch of forest. It was as if they were trapped in a loop. Desperate, Mark suggested they return to the campsite and try to wait it out until dawn. When they arrived, the fire had gone out and their tents were shredded. On the ground they found strange symbols carved into the dirt, symbols they hadn't noticed before. The creature appeared again, stepping out from the shadows. Its face was featureless, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It spoke for the first time, its voice a guttural growl. "You don't belong here." Emma, thinking quickly, grabbed a burning stick from the fire pit and swung it at the creature. It recoiled, letting out a bone-chilling scream. The group took the chance to flee once more. When dawn finally broke, the forest seemed normal again. The group stumbled back to their car and found the road leading out of the forest. As they drove away, they saw a sign they hadn't noticed before. "Beware, Shadow Hollow is alive." They never spoke of that night again, but each of them was haunted by the same nightmare. The glowing eyes and the whispering voices, always just out of reach.